haven't seen any gators yet.
I was very uncomfortable eating gator this morning.
I was always told that if the gators get too big, the company comes in and basically catches them and releases them in like the wild. But maybe they're not really releasing them. They're not going to a gator farm.
You think it's like when you send a pig off and they're like, yeah, send it to the abattoir, and it comes back and they're like, don't worry, it was a different pig of the same weight. So like, I know. It was
I think maybe the gators we're eating in our sausages for breakfast are the gators that get too big.
Yeah, good ball. Great drive.
It was not too many years ago that the site at Cabot Citrus Farms was known as World Woods, a 36-hole complex owned by a Japanese man named Yukihisa Inoue. In the late 1980s, he set about building 2 courses that would resemble Pine Valley and Augusta National, and sent forth the great contemporary architect of the era, Tom Fazio, to build his dream. Sprawling parcel of sand in Florida with elevation change and majestic woodland would be the ideal site for anyone trying to replicate those venues. With hindsight, the objective was nothing if not ambitious. Aim for the stars and you may hit the moon. But the course of World Woods were always well regarded and great example of accessible golf. Pine Barrens and Rolling Oaks, even the names had echoes of the inspirations behind them. Fortunes come and go with golf clubs. They have boom years and they have lean years. And when the recession hit in '91, the start of Japan's lost decade, it meant there was little to no funds available to invest in property, and sadly, the resort never quite achieved its ambitious potential. Many years would pass, and in December 2021, after several attempts, Ben Cowan-Dewar purchased the site and it would become known as Cabot Citrus Farms. In the 10 years preceding, Ben and the Cabot team had opened their first site in Nova Scotia in Canada and become one of the world's most coveted resorts. It grew from 1 course to 2, and the appetite for resort golf was still there. Ben developed Cabot St. Lucia with Core and Crenshaw. They acquired Castle Stewart, what would become known as Cabot Highlands, and the creation of Cabot Bordeaux, which was previously Golf de Medoc, another 36-hole complex with Rod Whitman and Bill Core's fingerprints all over it. Cabot has become skilled in spotting opportunities and finding those venues where new life can be breathed into them. That je ne sais quoi that makes a visit somewhere feel a little extra special.
Does it get any better?
There's more of a boutique feel to things, personal, friendly, but ultimately it's all centred around the golf. Signature touches like the cups which send out a sound when you hole out, or the branding throughout each property is truly exceptional. But it's just the icing on the cake. You feel that if Walt Disney was setting out to build a golf course, he would have done things much like Cabot. At Citrus Farms you have 2 championship golf courses. The Karoo, the sound of the native sandhill cranes which watch the action from above the pines, was designed by Kyle Franz and saw Pine Barrens side completely reimagined.
I've done that again.
Oh, they are shocking, Ryan, those 2 efforts.
The second course, the Roost, where the turkeys can often be heard roosting in the oaks and woodlands around, is the second course to be opened, and it was a collaborative effort by Mike Nuzzo, Kyle Franz, Rod Whitman and Rand Morrisett.
Cabot Citrus Farms has been a great project. It's a really cool destination. I've been responsible for the squeeze, the 10-hole course, the Wedge, which is an illuminated 9-hole par 3 course, but it's really 11 holes, and the practice area, the putting course, and I also led the design of the Roost, working with Kyle, Rod Whitman, and Rand Morrisett. A lot of golf holes. Yeah, the brief is to make everything as good as we can, every single golf hole. And that started with the squeeze and the wedge, and I would go spend time with Kyle on the Karoo and see what Kyle was working on and what the shapers were doing. Kyle's been creative since he was born, so there was lots of creativity on property. So we had lots of opportunity to discuss and share, and it probably would have been pretty hard to come up with holes that weren't interesting. So there was no way that we weren't going to have enough ideas. It's then trying to have the ideas all fit together. Then here comes Rod Whitman. So Rod Whitman we kind of set them up to have a nice, great blank-ish canvas to work with. And Slade Grant was another one of our great shapers. Slade's been, so Jacob's been a shaper for 30 years, Slade's been a shaper for 40 years, and they didn't really know Rod that well. They heard that Rod was going to come in and be responsible for the greens and the surrounds and be part of the design team. So Slade's exact quote to me was, Slade's been shaping for 40 years, he thought he knew everything until he met Rod. So Rod comes in with 50 years of experience. Rod is just Rod. He is humble, he's awesome. We spent a lot of time together. I cherished all the time I spent with Rod. So these guys have been shaping for 7 years between the two of them, and they both were like, oh my God, Rod, he's, so Slade, his exact words were, I thought I knew everything until I watched Rod work, and now I have a whole bunch of questions for Rod, and he basically learned a lot.
The layout around the Roost handles sharp elevation changes within the holes and maximises some of the natural land features that are there. The 40-foot sinkhole that you encounter on the 14th as you play directly across it, or the natural ripple green on 17 that you play down to on your way home, have been thoughtfully incorporated into the design. While there are other greens on site which have been pushed and moved around to create maximum theatre, which is a defining feature around the whole resort. The Roost opens with what might be the strongest hole on the entire resort. You're almost not quite ready for it. A high ridge in the fairway conceals the green, which races away from front to back. It feels like the sort of thing you'd expect to see at Cruden Bay or the west coast of Ireland.
Pretty good.
It's an early indication in the round that you're going to have to roll with the punches. Unapologetically embracing the game that we play is really fair.
Nice first hole.
It would be unfair to say the course is tricked up, but the inclusion of blind shots, something that has been sadly reduced from modern architecture, changes in elevation and contours around the green mean the player that takes a conservative line is often rewarded. Where the Roost course feels more intimate and it rolls through the woodland, the Karoo course is on a truly remarkable scale. The towering veteran trees that remain serve only to match the scale of the blowout bunkering, the waste areas that define the aesthetic of the course. And while the contours within and around the greens are enormous, they feel more balanced than many of the new builds. The modern era of course design has shifted towards bold shaping in the greens, at times excessive and often to the detriment of the course itself. A lack of challenge from the tee has been replaced with greens that readily repel anything that's less than perfect. While people don't lose their ball, they can lose their minds chipping back and forwards around the green. The Karoo has these striking contours in abundance. The balance feels to work somehow. The scale of the slopes match the majestic surroundings, and it feels more in keeping as a result. There's a healthy balance of benevolent slopes and kickers which surprise and delight, as well as a fiendish banks which shunt the ball astray. And they all have been used thoughtfully to amplify the strategy of the holes. The 13th on the Karoo might be one of the best holes in Florida. The long par 4 with the boomerang green resembling something from a NASCAR race circuit is partially hidden from view by the rolling contours that sit in the middle of the fairway. It feels like a modern day version of the 9th hole at Rye, with a simple spine of the fairway underpinning the strategy. And then there's the 15th, a short par 4 which isn't just a case of pulling driver and swinging for the fences. The green is buried deep down in the lowland to the right. It's reachable for the bigger hitter, but it's also fraught with danger around the green. Holes like 16th with its bunker turned green at the front, a chance to hole in one if all things go to plan. And with its beautiful aesthetic, it's a shot you want to step up and hit. And greens like 17, a true risk-reward par 5 gives you a chance to be a hero, but the player that navigates the green complex cascading from front to back will almost certainly prevail if the match is close on the penultimate hole. It would be remiss not to mention the Squeeze and Wedge. Not just a clever citrus-themed name, these are ideal playgrounds for the evening adventurer. Mike Nuzzo built an 11-hole half-par squeeze course as a way to pack in more fun into the property. Littered with drivable par 4s and short 3s, with enormous slopes to feed the ball off, and one 600-yard par 5, the longest on the property.
If I were to go back to World Woods, I wouldn't have gone back and spent any time on the executive course or the practice holes. I would just spend all my time on the main courses. So the goal was to have it to be a center point for the property, so people weren't just discussing the two big courses, at the 19th hole, they were discussing the entire property. There were some constraints in that still was only 100 acres. So I had to, I guess you could say I had to get pretty creative to make best use of the land and the shape. And that's why the squeeze wound up being as different as it is.
This is no afterthought. It's possibly the most enjoyable stretch of holes on the entire resort. A brilliant example of why golf needs more innovative setups like this, which can be squeezed into a smaller acreage, and if taken into a municipal world, could become just what the game needs to spark interest in a new wave of golfers. It might be shorter, but the result is one where you hit more shots and demand a creative approach to the game. And then there's the Wedge, a floodlit par 3 with street food and cocktails. As the sun sets, you kick back and enjoy the music and other thoughtful accompaniment. Throughout the ages, fables are told and they come in chapters. The generic theme is one of scene setting. A protagonist endures strife and then with an almighty effort overcomes the odds and leaves the story with a happy ending. Whilst this story began with a Japanese businessman seeking to build his answer to the world's best golf courses, the strife came with financial turmoil and a new protagonist, one with vim and endeavour, has sought to turn that initial dream into a reality. 35 years on, the golfing site at Citrus Farms looks like it has more promise than ever, and as the story goes, they lived happily ever after.